The freezing mud should have been her grave. Stripped of her dignity, rejected by her mate, and hunted by her own pack, Ivy Smith dragged herself into an abandoned barn to surrender to the cold. She closed her eyes, expecting the darkness to win. Yet when morning broke, death hadn't come. Instead, she woke up buried under a mountain of fur, radiating warmth. 10 massive, feral alpha wolves slept around her, curled tight as if she were the center of their universe. The country's most dangerous pack hadn't eaten her. They were protecting her. But why? And what happens when the alpha who discarded her returns to claim what he lost? This is how a rejected Omega became the queen of the wolves. The sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the grand hall of the Silver Moon Pack house, silencing the murmurs of the elite guests. Ivy Smith froze, her hands trembling as she stared down at the fragments of the antique vase on the polished hardwood floor. It wasn't just a vase, it was a Ming Dynasty replica, a gift from the neighboring Alpha. And it was the excuse he had been waiting for. "Look at you!" A deep, sneering voice cut through the room. "You can't even serve a drink without destroying the legacy of this pack." Ivy looked up, her eyes meeting the cold, steel-grey gaze of Alpha Cade Miller. He was the man she had loved since childhood, the man the moon goddess had destined her to be with. But for 3 years, he had refused to complete the mating bond. He kept her as a glorified servant, an Omega in title but a slave in practice, waiting for a better option. Beside him stood Jessica Thorne, a tall, striking blonde from the wealthy Northern Summit pack. She smirked, sipping her champagne, her hand resting possessively on Cade's bicep. "I'm sorry, Alpha," Ivy whispered, dropping to her knees to pick up the shards with her bare hands. A sharp piece sliced her thumb, and a drop of crimson blood hit the floor. "I slipped. The floor was wet." "Because you are clumsy," Cade spat. He stepped closer, towering over her. The music had stopped. Every high-ranking wolf in the territory was watching. "I am tired of this, Ivy. I am tired of your weakness. I am tired of your scent, like wet dog and desperation." "Cade, please," she begged quietly, sensing the shift in the air. "Don't do this here." "I, Alpha Cade Miller of the Silver Moon Pack," his voice boomed, infused with alpha command that made the windows rattle, "reject you, Ivy Smith, as my mate." The pain hit her like a physical blow to the chest. It was the snapping of a spiritual cord, a burning sensation that started in her heart and tore through her veins. Ivy gasped, clutching her chest, collapsing fully onto the broken porcelain. The shards dug into her skin, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the rejection. "I accept your rejection," Jessica laughed cruelly, though she wasn't the one being addressed. Cade looked down at Ivy, his face void of emotion. "And since you are no longer my mate, and clearly useless as a servant, you have no place here. You are rogue. You have 1 hour to leave Silver Moon territory. If my patrols find you after that, they have orders to kill on sight." A collective gasp went through the room, but no one stepped forward. No one defied Cade. He was too rich, too powerful, and too cruel. Ivy stood up, her knees shaking. Blood dripped from her hand onto a tattered grey dress. She looked at Cade one last time, searching for a shred of the boy she used to know. There was nothing there. Just a monster in an Italian suit. "You will regret this, Cade," she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady. "Get out," he growled. Ivy ran. She didn't pack a bag. She didn't grab a coat. She burst out the back servants' entrance and into the biting November night. The rain had turned to sleet, slashing sideways in the wind. She ran until her lungs burned. She ran past the well-lit suburban houses of the pack members, past the guard stations, and into the dense, untamed woods of the borderlands. Her wolf, a small, timid creature, was whimpering in her mind, too broken by the rejection to shift and help her. Hours passed. The temperature dropped well below freezing. Ivy's feet were numb, her dress soaked through and clinging to her shivering frame. She was crossing into the no-man's land, a stretch of unclaimed territory between the Silver Moon Pack and the mysterious, feared Black Hollows. Legend said the Black Hollows were haunted. They said a pack of ghost wolves, mercenaries who had lost their minds to their feral instincts, roamed these woods. They killed indiscriminately. They were monsters of war, cast out by civilized society. But as the sleet turned to heavy snow, Ivy didn't care about monsters. She just wanted to stop shivering. Through the darkness, she saw a structure, a collapsing, timber-framed barn that looked like it hadn't been used since the 1950s. The roof was sagging, but it had walls. Ivy stumbled toward it, pushing open the heavy, rotting door. Inside, it smelled of dry hay, old oil, and something else. Something musky and intense, like ozone and pine. But her senses were dulling from hypothermia. She found a pile of relatively dry hay in the corner, furthest from the drafty door. She curled into a ball, tucking her knees to her chest, trying to preserve whatever body heat she had left. "I'm sorry, Wolf," she whispered to her inner spirit. "I failed us." As she drifted into consciousness, she thought she heard the sound of paws on the wooden floorboards, heavy paws, many of them. But she was too far gone to move. She surrendered to the dark, assuming it would be her final sleep. Ivy expected death. She expected the void. Instead, she woke up to the sensation of a furnace. It was a slow, groggy awakening. The first thing she noticed was the heat. It was oppressive, heavy, and wonderful. She wasn't shivering. In fact, she was sweating. She tried to move her arm, but it was pinned. Something heavy and fur-covered was lying across her chest. Ivy blinked her eyes open, the morning light streaming through the cracks in the barn roof, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. She froze. Directly in front of her face, mere inches away, was a snout. A massive, charcoal-black snout. The wolf attached to it was enormous, easily twice the size of a normal timber wolf. Its eyes were closed, its breathing deep and rhythmic. A small huff of air from its nose ruffled her hair. Ivy's heart slammed against her ribs. She held her breath, her eyes darting around. She wasn't just sleeping with a wolf. She was buried in them. To her left, a russet-colored wolf was curled against her back, acting as a living heater. Across her legs lay two more, one silver, one spotted grey. Above her head, acting almost like a pillow, was another. She counted them as her panic rose. 1, 2, 3, 10. 10 gigantic, lethal-looking wolves were piled on top of and around her in a perfect, circular nest. This wasn't normal pack behavior. Adult wolves didn't cuddle with strangers. They killed strangers. Especially these wolves. She recognized the markings on the charcoal wolf's ear, a jagged scar. These were the ghost wolves of Black Hollows, the mercenaries, the ones mothers told their pups about to make them behave. They were supposed to be mindless killing machines, stripped of their humanity by the trauma of war. Why wasn't she being torn apart? Ivy tried to slowly slide her leg out from under the silver wolf. As soon as she moved, a low rumble vibrated through the pile. It wasn't a growl of aggression. It was a rumble of contentment, like a cat purring, but deeper. The charcoal wolf in front of her opened one eye. It was gold, pierced with flecks of obsidian. Ivy stopped breathing. This is it, she thought. Breakfast time. The wolf lifted its massive head. It looked at her, then leaned forward and licked her cheek. One rough, wet swipe that covered half her face. Then it rested its chin back on her shoulder and let out a heavy sigh, closing its eyes again. "What?" Ivy whispered, her voice raspy. At the sound of her voice, the dynamic in the barn shifted instantly. The lazy, sleepy atmosphere evaporated. In a blur of motion, the pile dismantled. The wolves scrambled back, claws scrabbling on the wood, forming a defensive semicircle around her. They weren't growling at her, but they were alert, watching her with intense, intelligent eyes. The charcoal wolf, the leader, clearly, stepped back. The air shimmered around him, the sound of bones cracking filling the silence. The shift was fast, faster than any shifter she had ever seen. Standing in place of the beast was a man. He was tall, well over 6'4", with corded muscle defining every inch of his torso. He was naked, standard for a shift, but he didn't seem to care. He had dark, messy hair, a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and those same piercing gold and obsidian eyes. Scars mapped his skin, telling stories of 100 battles. This was Roman Pierce, the alpha of the damned, the man the council had exiled 5 years ago for being too volatile. He stared at Ivy, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled her scent. He looked confused. He looked at his hands, then at his pack members who were also beginning to shift into human forms, pulling on tattered pairs of jeans and shorts they had stashed in the barn corners. "Who are you?" Roman's voice was gravel and smoke. It wasn't a yell, it was a demand. Ivy pulled her knees to her chest, trying to cover herself with the shredded remains of her dress. I'm Ivy. Ivy Smith." "Smith?" Roman narrowed his eyes. "Silver Moon Pack." "Not anymore," she whispered. "I was rejected. I'm a rogue." Roman took a step closer. The other 9 men, all huge, all scarred, all looking at her with a mix of awe and suspicion, leaned in. "Why are you alive?" Roman asked, his tone genuinely perplexed. "Excuse me?" Ivy blinked. "We don't sleep," Roman said bluntly. "We haven't slept in 5 years, not a real sleep. The feral instinct, the noise in our heads. It never stops. It keeps us awake, keeps us on edge. That's why we live out here. So we don't hurt anyone." He gestured to the spot on the floor where they had all been piled up. "I came in here last night to wait out the storm," Roman continued. "I found you. You smelled like rain and lavender. And for the first time since the War of the Ashes, the noise stopped. My wolf just laid down. One of the other men, a blonde with a jagged scar running down his neck, his name was Silas, stepped forward. It wasn't just you, Roman. We all felt it. It was like someone turned off the static. We just needed to be close to it. Close to her." Ivy looked at them. These weren't monsters. They were exhausted soldiers, men who had been driven mad by their own heightened senses, unable to find peace. "I didn't do anything," Ivy said. "I just slept." Roman knelt down in front of her, ignoring his nudity, his intense gaze locking onto hers. "You did something, Ivy Smith. You knocked out 10 alpha killers like they were puppies." He reached out a hand. Ivy flinched, expecting a strike, a reflex from years living under Cade's rule. Roman froze. His eyes darkened, but not at her. "Someone hurt you." My former alpha," she admitted. Roman's jaw clenched. Well, he made a mistake, a fatal one. He kept his hand extended, palm up. An offer. "We can't let you leave. If you leave, the noise comes back. I can feel it creeping in already at the edges of my mind." "So I'm a prisoner?" Ivy asked, fear creeping back in. "No," Roman said softly, a strange, possessive light entering his eyes. "You're the cure, and until we figure out why, you're under the protection of the Ghost Pack." He looked back at his men. "Silas, get her a shirt." Jax, secure the perimeter. If Silver Moon trackers come looking for their garbage, send them back in pieces. Roman looked back at Ivy. You're safe now, little bird. Go back to sleep. For the first time in her life, Ivy Smith was the most important person in the room. The barn, as it turned out, was just a facade. Beneath the rotting timbers lay a sophisticated, reinforced concrete bunker, a remnant of the old wars, repurposed by Roman and his unit as a sanctuary. It was stark, industrial, and utilitarian, filled with weapons racks and tactical maps, but it was warm. It had been 3 days since Ivy had stumbled into their territory. 3 days since the noise in the heads of the ghost wolves had stopped. Life in the bunker had developed a strange, intense rhythm. The 10 men, Roman, Silas, Jax, Knox, Liam, Cohen, Reed, Nash, Bow, and Hunter, orbited her like planets around a sun. It was an overwhelming change for Ivy. At the Silver Moon Pack, she had been invisible. She was the one who scrubbed the floors, cooked the meals for 200 wolves, and disappeared before anyone could scold her. Here, she couldn't walk across the room without 3 alpha-level warriors shadowing her steps. You're shivering, Knox grunted. He was the largest of the pack, a mountain of muscle with a shaved head and tattoos covering his neck. Before Ivy could answer that she was fine, he had ripped the thermal blanket off his own bed and wrapped it around her shoulders, tucking the ends in tight. I'm okay, Knox. Really, Ivy said, offering a small, tentative smile. Your heart rate spiked, Jax called out from the kitchen area, where he was attempting, and failing, to open a can of beans with a combat knife. We can hear it. You're stressed. I'm not stressed, Ivy sighed, pulling the blanket tighter. I'm just crowded. It was the truth. The dynamic of the ghost pack was unlike anything she had ever learned about in school. They were suffering from what Roman called feral resonance. The military experiments that had turned them into super soldiers had also stripped away their ability to filter sensory input. They heard everything, smelled everything, felt everything. It was a constant, screaming cacophony that drove them to violence just to silence the world. Until Ivy, her scent, a mix of vanilla, rain, and something ancient, acted as a biological dampener. It was a mute button for their trauma. But it had a side effect. They were addicted to it. At night, the nest was mandatory. It wasn't sexual, it was survival. They had dragged a dozen mattresses into the center of the main common room, pushing them together to form a massive bed. Every night, Ivy lay in the middle, and 10 lethal soldiers piled around her, limbs tangled, heads resting on her legs or stomach. If she got up to use the bathroom, half of them would wake up growling at the sudden return of the static in their heads. Leave her alone. She's not a porcelain doll, Roman's voice cut through the room. The Alpha walked in from the perimeter patrol. He smelled of snow and pine resin. He unzipped his tactical vest, tossing it onto a chair, his gold-flecked eyes locking onto Ivy immediately. He always checked her first. It was a reflex he didn't try to hide. Status? Silas asked, looking up from cleaning his rifle. Silver Moon patrols are getting bold, Roman said, walking over to the kitchenette. He grabbed a bottle of water, draining half of it in one go. I found tracks near the creek. They're looking for something. Ivy stiffened. They're looking for me. They rejected you, Roman said, crushing the plastic bottle in his hand. That bond is severed. Cade has no claim. Cade doesn't like losing things, Ivy said quietly, even things he threw away. He's possessive. If he thinks I'm with another pack, his ego won't handle it. Roman walked over to where Ivy was sitting on a worn leather couch. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. The sheer power radiating off him was intoxicating. In the Silver Moon pack, an Omega was expected to lower their eyes. Roman forced her to look at him. "Let him come," Roman said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous purr. "I have been looking for a reason to let the beast out. Protecting you seems like a good one." "I don't want a war," Ivy whispered. "You guys finally found peace. I don't want to bring my chaos into your home." Roman reached out, his rough thumb tracing the line of her jaw. "Ivy, look around you." She looked. Knox was pretending to read a book, but was clearly watching her. Jax had abandoned the beans and was leaning against the counter, smiling at her. Cohen and Reed were arm wrestling, but they were angled toward her. "Before you walked into that barn, Cohen hadn't spoken in 6 months," Roman said softly. Knox slept with a loaded gun in his hand. "I was losing my mind, Ivy. I was days away from putting a bullet in my own brain just to stop the noise." Ivy gasped, her eyes widening. "You aren't chaos," Roman said firmly. "You are the only quiet thing we have ever known. If Cade Miller wants you back, he will have to kill every single one of us, and I promise you, he doesn't have the ammunition for that." Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen. "Damn it, Jax!" Liam yelled. "You exploded the beans." Ivy looked over. Jax had apparently tried to microwave the can. Bean sauce was dripping from the ceiling. The tension in the room snapped, replaced by groans and laughter. Ivy stood up, shedding Knox's blanket. "Move," she commanded, her voice surprisingly authoritative. "I'll cook before you burn the bunker down." The men froze. Omegas didn't order alphas around. But then, Roman smiled. It was a genuine, rare smile that transformed his scarred face. "You heard the lady," Roman barked. "Jax, clean that up. Ivy's taking command of the kitchen." As Ivy chopped vegetables, real food she had found in their poorly stocked pantry, she felt a strange warmth bloom in her chest. She wasn't serving them because she had to. She was nurturing them. And for the first time, she realized that these monsters didn't want a slave. They wanted a queen. 3 days. It had only been 3 days since Cade Miller had banished Ivy, and the Silver Moon Pack house was falling apart. Cade sat in his office, staring at a stack of paperwork that made no sense to him. The coffee on his desk was cold and tasted like sludge. His shirt was unironed because the laundry staff didn't know how to handle his imported silk blends. "This is ridiculous," Jessica screeched, storming into his office without knocking. Cade rubbed his temples, a headache throbbing behind his eyes. "What is it now, Jessica?" "The gala is tomorrow night," she snapped, throwing her hands up. "And the florists haven't been confirmed. The seating chart is a disaster, and the chef just quit because no one gave him the dietary restriction list." "So fix it," Cade growled, slamming his hand on the desk. "You're the future Luna. This is your job." "My job is to look good and support you," Jessica hissed. "I don't do logistics. That little mouse of yours used to handle all of this. Why didn't she leave a binder or something?" Ivy. Her name hung in the air like a curse. Cade leaned back in his chair, scowling. He had expected Ivy to crawl to the border, cry for a night, and then maybe he'd let her back in as a lower-tier servant after she learned her lesson. He expected her to be miserable, but she was gone, vanished, and her absence was felt everywhere. The pack finances were disorganized. Ivy used to balance the books late at night. The disputes between pack members were escalating. Ivy used to mediate them quietly before they reached Cade's desk. The house felt cold, sterile, and hostile. "I sent trackers," Cade muttered. "And?" Jessica demanded. "And they found nothing. The scent trail ends at the dead zone." "The Black Hollows," Jessica laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Then she's dead. The ghost wolves tore her apart. Good riddance." Cade felt a strange, sharp twist in his gut. It wasn't grief, he told himself, it was annoyance. Ivy was his possession. He had broken her, yes, but he hadn't given permission for anyone else to break her. The door to his office opened again. It was his beta, Marcus. Note, user requested no Marcus, changing name to Bennett. Alpha, Bennett said, his face pale. We have a problem. If it's about the flowers, I don't care, Cade snapped. It's not the flowers, it's the patrol report, Bennett said, stepping forward and placing a tablet on the desk. We picked up a heat signature on the drone surveillance near the old barn in the hollows. There's movement. Ghost wolves? Cade asked. Yes, but look at this. Bennett zoomed in on a grainy thermal image. It showed a group of large heat signatures, wolves, clustered around a smaller, human-shaped signature. They weren't attacking it. They were walking with it. Cade squinted. The figure was small, wearing oversized clothes. Is that... Cade's voice trailed off. It matches Ivy's biometrics, Bennett confirmed. Cade stood up so fast his chair toppled over. She's alive? And she's with them. It looks like they've taken her in, Bennett said, sounding baffled. The reports say the ghost pack kills everyone. Why is she alive? They're holding her hostage, Jessica interjected, looking at her nails. Obviously, using her as bait. No, Cade said, a low growl building in his chest. His wolf was pacing, agitated. He had rejected her. Yes. But seeing her on the screen, surrounded by other males, feral, dangerous males, triggered a primal possessiveness he couldn't control. She was his failure, his reject. Prepare the SUV, Cade ordered, grabbing his coat. Cade, you can't go into the hollows, Jessica argued. It's suicide. And for what? The help? She has pack secrets, Cade lied, trying to justify the burning jealousy in his gut. She knows the security codes. She knows the vault combinations. I can't leave her with mercenaries. I'm coming with you, Bennett said, checking his sidearm. Bring the elite guard, Cade commanded. 10 of them. Full gear. We're getting her back. The drive to the border took 20 minutes. Cade, Bennett, and 2 SUVs full of armed shifters stopped at the edge of the tree line, where the pristine pavement of Silver Moon territory turned into the muddy, overgrown track of the hollows. The woods here were silent, unnaturally so. Cade stepped out of the car, adjusting his cuffs. Spread out. We move in formation. If you see the ghost wolves, shoot to kill. But the girl remains alive. Understood? Yes, Alpha, the guards chorused. They moved into the forest. The air grew colder, heavier. Cade could smell the ozone scent of the ghost pack. It was distinct, chemical, and wild. They reached the clearing near the old barn. Cade expected an ambush. He expected gunfire. Instead, he saw a domestic scene that made his blood boil. Ivy was sitting on the porch of the dilapidated barn, wrapped in a thick flannel shirt that was 5 sizes too big for her. She was holding a mug of something steaming. Sitting at her feet, carving a piece of wood with a knife, was a blond man with a scar on his neck, Silas. They were talking, laughing. Ivy looked happy. Her cheeks were flushed with health, not the pale, drawn look she had worn for years in Cade's house. "Ivy!" Cade's voice boomed across the clearing. Ivy jumped, dropping her mug. It shattered, a stark reminder of the vase that had started this all. Silas was on his feet in a microsecond, his body shifting in front of Ivy, shielding her. "Cade," Ivy whispered, fear draining the color from her face. Cade stepped into the clearing, his 12 guards fanning out behind him. "You've caused quite a mess, Ivy. Running away to play house with these mutts?" "Leave her alone," Silas growled, his voice vibrating with alpha power. "Step aside, rogue," Cade sneered. I am Alpha Cade Miller. That woman is property of the Silver Moon Pack." "She's not property," a new voice spoke. From the shadows of the barn door, Roman Pierce emerged. He didn't look like a civilized alpha. He was shirtless, barefoot, covered in grease and dirt, holding a heavy iron crowbar loosely in his right hand. He looked like death incarnate. Roman walked down the steps, his eyes burning gold. He didn't stop until he was nose to nose with Cade. Roman was bigger, broader, and radiated a type of violence Cade had only read about in history books. "You rejected her," Roman said, his voice calm, terrifyingly so. "We heard the story, broken vows, public humiliation. You severed the bond." "I changed my mind," Cade said, trying to hold his ground, though his wolf was whining in submission to Roman's aura. "She comes back with me. Now. Ivy, get in the car." Ivy stepped out from behind Silas. She looked at Cade. For years, an order from him would have made her jump. But now, she could feel the 10 threads of connection to the men behind her. She could feel Roman's rage, controlled only for her sake. "No," Ivy said. The silence that followed was deafening. "What did you say?" Cade whispered. "I said no," Ivy repeated, her voice gaining strength. "I'm not a vase you can glue back together, Cade. You threw me away. I found a new home." "Home?" Cade laughed, gesturing to the rotting barn. "In this trash heap, with these broken toys?" He lunged for her, his hand reaching to grab her arm. He never made contact. There was a blur of motion, a sickening crunch of bone. Cade was flying backward, landing hard in the mud, 10 feet away. Roman stood where Cade had been, his fist still raised. He hadn't even shifted. He had just punched an alpha across a clearing with human strength. The Silver Moon guards raised their weapons, the click of safety catches echoing. Simultaneously, the woods around them came alive. From the brush, from the roof of the barn, from the shadows, 7 other wolves emerged, already shifted in their massive beast forms. They snarled, teeth bared, surrounding the Silver Moon unit. Roman cracked his neck, staring down at the groaning Cade. "You have 3 seconds to leave my land," Roman said, his voice dropping into the alpha command tone that forced the Silver Moon wolves to their knees. "Before I feed you to my pack piece by piece." Cade clutched his broken jaw, looking up at Ivy. He saw the way she looked at Roman. Not with fear, but with trust. "This isn't over," Cade slurred, spitting blood. "It was over the night you let her walk into the snow," Roman replied. "Now run." Cade scrambled up, signaling his men. They retreated, tails between their legs, engines roaring as they fled back to civilization. Ivy stood trembling as the adrenaline faded. Roman turned to her, the violence in his eyes instantly softening as he scanned her for injuries. "Did he touch you?" Roman demanded. "No," she breathed. Roman pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her hair, inhaling deeply to calm his raging wolf. "He will never touch you again. I promise." But as Ivy held on to him, she saw something glinting in the mud where Cade had fallen. It was a silver locket she had left behind, her mother's locket. Cade had brought it. He hadn't come just to recover a servant. He had come because he was obsessed. And Ivy knew, as she listened to the heartbeat of the ghost alpha, that Cade wouldn't stop. He would bring an army next time. The confrontation with Cade shifted the atmosphere in the bunker from a temporary shelter to a war room. The illusion of isolation was broken. The Silver Moon Pack knew where they were. Later that night, the adrenaline had faded, leaving a heavy silence in the common area. Roman sat on the edge of the oversized mattress nest, his hands resting on his knees. His knuckles were bruised purple from the impact with Cade's jaw, a testament to how hard he had held back. If he had used his full strength, Cade would be headless. Ivy approached him slowly, carrying a bowl of warm water and a clean cloth. "Let me see." Roman looked up, his golden eyes swirling with a mixture of rage and exhaustion. "It heals fast, Ivy. You don't need to serve me." "I'm not serving you," she said firmly, kneeling between his spread knees. She took his massive hand in hers, dipping the cloth in the water. "I'm taking care of you. There's a difference." The contact sent a jolt through Roman. He hissed, not from pain, but from the overwhelming quiet that washed over his mind the moment she touched him. The static, the screaming memories of the war, the bloodlust, vanished. "Why?" Roman whispered, watching her gently clean the dried blood from his knuckles. "Why does your touch do that?" "Do what?" "Silence the world," he said. "The scientists who made us. They stripped our filters. We hear everything. The heartbeat of a deer a mile away. The electricity humming in the walls. It drives us mad. But you're like a lead wall. You absorb it." Ivy paused, looking at his scarred hand. "Cade used to say I was empty, that my wolf was too quiet. He called me a void. He was an idiot," Roman growled. "You aren't empty, Ivy. You're an anchor, a void omega. They are myths, creatures capable of grounding the most volatile alpha energy. You were never meant for a weakling like Cade Miller. You were made for monsters like us." He reached out, cupping her cheek. The roughness of his calloused palm against her skin made her breath hitch. "He will come back," Roman said, his voice darkening. "He won't bring guards next time. He'll bring lawyers and the council. He'll try to paint us as kidnappers." "I won't go," Ivy said fiercely. "We need supplies," Silas interrupted gently from the doorway. He looked apologetic. "If we're going to undergo a siege, we need more than beans, and Ivy needs clothes that aren't stolen from our laundry pile." Roman nodded, standing up. "We go to town, the neutral zone, Blackwood Market." "Is that safe?" Ivy asked. "No," Knox grinned, cracking his neck as he walked by. "But it'll be fun." Blackwood Market was a neutral territory town between the major packs. It was a place of commerce, flashy cars, and high-end boutiques where wolves from different territories mingled. When the two matte black SUVs of the Ghost Pack rolled into the main street, the chatter on the sidewalks stopped. The ghost wolves were urban legends, boogeymen. Roman stepped out first, wearing a dark Henley and tactical cargo pants, sunglasses covering his eyes. He opened the back door, and Ivy stepped out. She was wearing a pair of Silas's jeans held up by a belt and a black hoodie. But walking flanked by Roman and Knox, she looked more powerful than any Luna in a designer dress. They moved as a phalanx, a V formation with Ivy in the protected center. They walked into the general store, then the pharmacy. Every movement of the men was synchronized, scanning for threats. "Look who it is!" A shrill voice cut through the air as they exited the pharmacy. Ivy froze. Standing near a display of imported wines was Jessica Thorne. She was surrounded by 3 other Silver Moon Pack women, all holding expensive shopping bags. Jessica looked Ivy up and down, sneering. "I heard you were living in a barn, but I didn't realize you had started dressing like a hobo too. It suits you." The women laughed. Roman took a step forward, but Ivy put a hand on his chest. The contact stopped him instantly. Ivy stepped out of the formation. "Hello, Jessica," Ivy said, her voice steady. "Buying champagne for the wedding? I hear the groom has a broken jaw. Might make the toast difficult." Jessica's face turned crimson. "You little mutt. You think because you found some rogue bodyguards you're special? You're still just a rejected Omega. Cade is going to have those animals put down, and you'll be scrubbing toilets in the cells until you die." "Hey," Knox rumbled, stepping up beside Ivy. He towered over Jessica, his shadow engulfing her. He didn't shout. He just smiled, a feral, predatory baring of teeth. "The lady is speaking. Lower your voice, or I'll lower your life expectancy." Jessica stumbled back, her scent spiking with ammonia fear. "Let's go," Ivy said, turning her back on them. "I don't want to smell her cheap perfume anymore." As they walked away, Ivy felt a shift. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She had just dismissed the future Lunar of the Silver Moon Pack, and 10 of the most dangerous men on Earth were grinning at her like proud brothers. But the victory was short-lived. As they reached the cars, Silas's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his face paling. "Roman," Silas said urgently. "It's a council alert. Broadcast to all packs." Roman took the phone. "Wanted. The criminal mercenaries known as the Ghost Pack. Kidnapping of a Silver Moon Pack member. Suspects are considered armed and mentally unstable. The High Council has authorized a termination order. Bounty: 5 million. The hostage, Ivy Smith, is believed to be under mind control." "Mind control?" Ivy gasped, reading over his shoulder. "He's spinning the narrative. He knows he can't beat you in a fight, so he's using the law." "It gets worse," Silas said. "The deadline. The council is meeting at the Silver Moon annual gala tomorrow night to ratify the order. Once they sign it, every bounty hunter in the state comes for us." Roman stared at the phone, then crushed it in his hand. "He wants a public execution," Roman said quietly. "He wants to destroy our reputation and take you back in front of the elite." "We have to run," Ivy said, gripping Roman's arm. "We can leave the state, hide in the mountains." Roman looked down at her. The gold in his eyes flared brighter than the sun. "No," he said. "We don't run. Not anymore. If Cade wants a show at his gala, we're going to give him one." The Silver Moon Gala was the event of the year. The grand ballroom was draped in silk and crystals. 500 guests from the surrounding territories, alphas, betas, dignitaries, and council members filled the room. Cade Miller stood on the raised dais, swirling a glass of scotch. His jaw was wired shut, hidden partially by a high collar, but the bruising was visible. Beside him, Jessica preened in a red velvet gown, acting the part of the concerned fiancé. "Thank you all for coming." Bennett, the beta, spoke into the microphone. "Tonight is a celebration, but also a solemn occasion. As you know, our dear pack member Ivy was brutally snatched by the feral Ghost Pack. Tonight, Councilman Drake will sign the execution order to free her." A murmur of sympathy went through the crowd. "Those monsters should be put down," an alpha from the crowd shouted. "They are rabid dogs," another cried. Cade nodded, his eyes cold. He had won. He would get Ivy back, drug her into submission, and the ghost wolves would be dead by sunrise. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open. They boomed. The sound was like a cannon shot. The music cut out instantly. The room fell into a terrified silence. Standing in the doorway was not a tactical team. It was a procession. Silas, Knox, and Jax walked in first. They weren't wearing dirty fatigues. They were wearing immaculate, custom-fitted black tuxedos. They moved with the lethal grace of panthers, their eyes scanning the room, hands loose at their sides, but ready to kill. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one dared to breathe. Then came the others. Liam, Cohen, Reed, all in black tie. And then, Roman. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that emphasized the terrifying width of his shoulders. His hair was slicked back, revealing the sharp, predatory lines of his face. He radiated power so intense that the crystal glasses on the nearby tables began to vibrate. On his arm was Ivy. She was unrecognizable. The pack had raided an old stash of supplies from their mercenary days, a safe house fund. They had bought her a gown of shimmering silver silk that looked like liquid moonlight. It clung to her curves, a slit running up her thigh. Her hair was cascaded in waves down her back. She wore no jewelry except for a single thin chain, a dog tag with the ghost pack insignia. She didn't look like a victim. She didn't look mind-controlled. She looked like a queen. Cade gripped the railing of the dais so hard the wood splintered. Jessica dropped her champagne glass. "Good evening." Roman's voice carried through the silent hall without a microphone. It was deep, resonating in the chest of every alpha present. "I hear there is a bounty on my head." Councilman Drake, a heavy-set man on the stage, sputtered, "Seize them! Guards! They are dangerous criminals!" The Silver Moon guards moved forward, but Knox and Silas stepped in front of Roman and Ivy. They didn't shift. They simply let out a collective low growl, a sound that triggered the primal flight response in every lesser wolf in the room. The guards froze. "We are not here to fight," Ivy spoke up. Her voice was clear, ringing like a bell. She squeezed Roman's arm and stepped forward, pulling him with her toward the stage. "Ivy," Cade mumbled through his wired jaw. "Get away from him. He's controlling you." "Is he?" Ivy asked, stopping in the center of the dance floor. She looked up at the dais. "You told the council I was kidnapped. You told them I was mentally unstable. You told them these men are mindless beasts." She turned to the crowd. 3 days ago, my alpha rejected me. He threw me into a blizzard to die. These beasts found me. They warmed me. They fed me. And they didn't ask for a single thing in return. "She's lying!" Jessica shrieked, her poise shattering. "She's a traitor. She's sleeping with them. A whore for the rogue pack." The insult hung in the air. Roman released Ivy's arm. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Careful," Roman said softly. "I do not bite. But I do tear." He looked at Councilman Drake. "You want to sign an execution order based on the word of a man who abuses his own pack? A man who destroys his own porcelain because he throws tantrums?" "He has a wired jaw because he attacked me," Roman continued, addressing the room. "I defended my mate." Gasps erupted. Mate. It wasn't a true mating bond yet. They hadn't marked each other. But the claim was undeniable. "She's not your mate," Cade roared, stumbling down the stairs. "She is Silver Moon property. She is a void, a nothing." "She is the anchor," Roman roared back, his voice finally breaking into the alpha thunder. The windows rattled. "She is the only thing that quiets the noise. She is more powerful than you, Cade, because she commands loyalty without breaking bones. You command fear." Roman turned to Ivy. "Show them." Ivy took a deep breath. She closed her eyes. She reached out with her senses, finding the chaotic, swirling energy of the room. The fear, the aggression, the confusion. She pulled. It was instinct. She visualized the noise as a storm and pulled it into herself, grounding it. A wave of absolute, supernatural calm washed over the ballroom. Alphas who had been ready to fight suddenly relaxed their shoulders. The anxiety in the air evaporated. It was a sensation of pure peace. The councilman's eyes went wide. "By the goddess! A spirit anchor!" Ivy opened her eyes. They were glowing a faint, soft silver. "I am not a victim," Ivy said to Cade, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs, looking small and pathetic. "And I am not yours." "I reject the Silver Moon pack," Ivy declared, the ancient words sealing the separation formally. "And I pledge myself to the Ghost Pack." "No," Cade screamed. He pulled a concealed handgun from his jacket, a coward's weapon in a shifter fight. He aimed it at Roman's chest. "If I can't have her, no one wins." "Gun!" Silas shouted. But before Cade could pull the trigger, the glass skylight above the ballroom shattered. It wasn't the ghost pack. It wasn't the guards. It was the media. A drone hovering above, broadcasting the entire event live to the Shifter network. Cade had invited the press to film his victory. Instead, he had just pulled a gun on an unarmed guest in front of the entire world. Cade froze, looking up at the drone, then back at Roman. Roman smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. "Checkmate," Roman whispered. Cade's finger tightened on the trigger anyway. He didn't care about the cameras anymore. He wanted blood. Bang! The shot rang out. Ivy screamed. Roman didn't fall. Knox had moved. Faster than sight. The giant of a man had stepped in front of his alpha. The bullet hit Knox in the shoulder, spinning him around. The peace Ivy had created shattered instantly. "Kill them all!" Roman roared, his eyes turning fully black. The 10 men in tuxedos didn't shift. They didn't need to. They moved like a scythe through wheat. The ballroom erupted into chaos. The sound of the gunshot did not echo like a crack of thunder. In the acoustic perfection of the ballroom, it sounded like a bomb. Time seemed to warp into a sickening slow motion. Ivy watched, her breath trapped in her throat, as Knox, the giant, laughing warrior who had wrapped her in blankets and cooked her breakfast, jerked violently back. A bloom of crimson exploded against the stark white of his tuxedo shirt, right at the shoulder. He didn't fall immediately. He stumbled, his massive frame shielding Roman and Ivy, acting as a wall of flesh and loyalty. "Knox!" Ivy's scream shattered the frozen silence. The spell broke. The ballroom erupted into screaming chaos. Guests scrambled over chairs, crystal glasses shattered against the floor, and the smell of gunpowder mixed with the scent of terrified sweat. But the ghost pack did not scream. They did not panic. As Knox hit the floor, Roman's face underwent a terrifying transformation. The golden flecks in his eyes were swallowed by a void of pure obsidian. He didn't shift into a wolf. He became something far worse. He became the warlord the history books were afraid to write about. "Kill them," Roman whispered. It wasn't a shout. It was a vibration that rattled the teeth of everyone in the room. The 10 men in tuxedos moved as one organism. 3 Silver Moon enforcers, hulking men in tactical gear who had rushed in from the side doors, lunged at Jax. The blonde mercenary didn't even unclasp his hands. He sidestepped a baton strike with liquid grace, grabbed a heavy magnum of champagne from a passing waiter's tray, and smashed it into the first guard's temple. Glass and wine sprayed like shrapnel. Before the man hit the floor, Jax had spun, driving his elbow into the throat of the second attacker. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Silas and Cohen moved through the crowd like smoke. They didn't use weapons. They used the environment. A guard raised a stun baton. Silas caught his wrist, snapped the bone with a sickening crunch, and tossed the man over a banquet table into a tower of chocolate fondue. On the dais, Cade Miller was fumbling with his gun, his hands shaking violently as he tried to clear a jam. He had expected the ghost wolves to cower. He had expected them to be animals. He hadn't expected a tactical unit that fought with the precision of a scalpel. "Stay back," Cade screamed, aiming the gun blindly. Roman didn't run. He walked. He walked up the marble stairs of the dais with a slow, predatory rhythm. Every step was a promise of violence. Cade fired. The bullet went wide, shattering a mirror behind Roman. Roman reached the top of the stairs. Cade swung the pistol like a club. Roman caught Cade's wrist in midair. The sound of Cade's wrist snapping was loud enough to be heard over the screams of the crowd. Cade howled, dropping to his knees. Roman grabbed him by the throat, lifting the alpha of the Silver Moon pack off the ground as if he weighed nothing more than a rag doll. "You hurt my brother," Roman hissed, his voice a guttural growl that bypassed human hearing and struck straight at the primal brain. "You stained my mate's dress with his blood." Roman drew back his fist, the knuckles white, ready to deliver a blow that would turn Cade's head into a memory. "Roman, stop!" The voice cut through the red haze of Roman's rage. It wasn't a plea, it was a command. Ivy was kneeling beside Knox, her hands pressing hard against his wound to staunch the flow of blood. Her silver dress was ruined, soaked in red, but her eyes were clear. She looked up at the dais, locking eyes with her mate. "Don't do it," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "He deserves to die," Roman roared, the veins in his neck bulging. "He is a disease." "He is," Ivy agreed, standing up. She walked toward the stairs, her blood-stained hands trembling slightly, but her chin held high. "But if you kill him now, in front of the cameras, in front of the council, you prove them right. You become the monster they fear. Don't let him turn you into a beast, Roman. You are better than him." Roman froze. He looked at Ivy. He saw the trust in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid for him. With a snarl of disgust, Roman threw Cade. The Silver Moon Alpha flew across the dais, crashing into the heavy podium, collapsing in a heap of bruised ego and broken bones. Councilman Drake, who had been cowering behind a pillar, finally stepped forward. He looked at the carnage, the unconscious guards, the blood on the floor, and the drone hovering overhead, live-streaming every second to the global shifter network. "Enough!" Drake bellowed. He pointed a shaking finger at Cade, who was wheezing on the floor. "Cade Miller, you have violated the sacred pact. You fired a weapon at an unarmed guest. You initiated violence at a peace gathering." They kidnapped her," Cade spat, blood bubbling from his lip. "I was saving her." "I was not kidnapped," Ivy said, stepping onto the dais. She stood next to Roman, her hand finding his. The contact instantly calmed his raging aura. "I was discarded. You threw me away like garbage, Cade. These men picked me up. They didn't chain me. They gave me a home." She looked out at the hundreds of stunned guests. "A true alpha protects the weak. Cade Miller only protects his ego." Drake nodded solemnly. "The Council has seen enough. By the power vested in me, I hereby strip Cade Miller of his alpha status. The Silver Moon Pack is under emergency stewardship. You are no longer alpha. You are nothing." Cade looked up, his eyes wild with desperation. He scanned the room for an ally. His eyes landed on Jessica, standing near the exit, her face a mask of revulsion. "Jessica," Cade croaked, tell them we're getting married." Jessica laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "I was marrying an alpha, Cade, not a criminal with a broken wrist. You're pathetic." She turned on her heel and walked out, her red dress trailing behind her like a pool of blood. Cade slumped, defeated. He had lost his rank, his pack, his fiancée, and his dignity in the span of 10 minutes. Roman turned to Ivy. He gently took her blood-stained hands in his, inspecting them for injuries. Finding none, he kissed her palms, smearing Knox's blood onto his own lips, a vow of shared burden. "The war is over, little bird," Roman whispered. "Not yet," Ivy said, looking back at Knox, who was being helped up by Silas and Jax. The giant winked at her, though his face was pale. "We have to get Knox home." Roman nodded. He turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the terrified elites. "If anyone tries to stop us," he announced, his voice low and dangerous, "I won't be as merciful as my queen." He swept Ivy into his arms, carrying her bridal style. Surrounded by his brothers, bloodied, bruised but unbroken, the Ghost Pack walked out of the ballroom. They left behind the shattered remains of the high society that had rejected them, walking into the night, united, lethal, and free. And that is how Ivy Smith went from a rejected servant to the queen of the most dangerous pack in the world. It's a reminder that sometimes the people who throw us away are just making room for the people who are destined to protect us. Cade Miller lost everything because of his arrogance, while Roman Pierce gained everything because of his loyalty. Karma doesn't always come instantly, but when it hits hard. What did you think of the Ghost Pack? Would you have chosen the safe, rich life with a cruel alpha, or would you take a chance on the monsters in the woods? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and wolves, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Until next time.